I remember when I was a teenager, one day I was in the basement at our church, the fellowship hall in the basement at St. Paul's in Amityville, and my pastor and I got into a conversation. And I don't remember what led to the conversation, but I remember what my pastor said to me that stuck with me almost in a shocking way for many years until I finally figured it all out. He said, if you could see ahead into your life, if you could see the future and what you were going to face, you would not want to live. And I said, that's crazy, man. Why would my pastor say that? That's not a very positive way to look at the world or look at life. Now, years later, I've come to see the wisdom in the words. And I'm sure he said it in a different way than I heard it as a teenager. But it all made sense as he pastored in a world filled with struggle and strife and challenges and the effects of sin. That if we were to see somehow through a crystal ball or a trip to the future all the challenges that would come up in our lives, it would be overwhelming. We couldn't handle it all at once. We know this to be true. We know that in unexpected moments, life throws challenges and struggles and difficulties before us. That the path and the pattern, the visions and the dreams that we had for our lives didn't always work out the way we planned or the way we expected. And sometimes there are really difficult days just to wake up and to move and to have our being. And we don't have to look very far to find reminders of this. We don't have to open the newspaper or look at the news. Many of us have daily reminders of this in our own life. Just the last couple of weeks, my aunt and uncle in Arizona, who we've gone to visit, and they're dear and near to us, they moved out to Arizona, to Sedona, 25 years ago. And for 20 years, they've been taking care of two horses that really have been their lifestyle. It's been part of what made them in their 70s and their early 80s, these healthy people who really I admire and respect. I mean, they've got more muscles than you can even imagine at that age because they're up at 5:30 in the morning feeding the horses. They're cleaning the stalls every day. Their life is regulated by these horses. Well, 2 years ago, 2 weeks ago, the older one, at 32 years, kind of expected, finally passed away. But the other one, just on Friday, from a broken heart from losing its stallmate, also died. In a matter of 2 weeks, their whole life has been turned upside down. Everything that they knew, that there was their routine, their whole health and lifestyle is now empty. And they're really struggling as they look at their own mortality. They look at what lies ahead for them in their life. And then a couple of weeks ago, right before Hunter, my youngest son, 17, 16 years old, went off on the mission trip, he had a friend at 17 years old who was diagnosed with cancer and died the week before they went on the mission trip. We can't even imagine the pain that family, those parents are bearing at that time. And we hear stories of that, and it reminds us of the difficulties and the challenges of life. These aren't the things we envision. These aren't the things we dream. But these are the realities that sometimes we face in our life. Life, because of sin, because of brokenness, because of death, is filled with challenges. Filled with things that test us. Filled with struggles. And yet in the midst of that, we hear this classic gospel lesson today. One of the most popular of all of Jesus' miracles, the feeding of the 5,000. It's one of the gospels, it's one of the miracles that's in all four of the gospels. You don't find that very often. That's how important the message is from this miracle, that all four of the evangelists, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all include this story. Because the point is powerful, and the point is necessary in the midst of our lives where we are constantly struggling, where we are constantly being challenged by the effects of broken life. Those disciples come to Jesus because the crowds, after being cured because of Jesus' compassion, it's getting to be evening, the sun is falling, and the disciples are saying they need to leave, they need to eat, right? Typical of those apostles. For as much time as they spent with Jesus, for all the miracles they had seen, they still didn't quite get it. They were still a little thick-headed. So they say to Jesus, send the crowds away so that they may go into the villages and buy food for themselves. Jesus says, they need not go away. You give them something to eat. But we only have 5 loaves and 2 fish. That's it. And you know the rest of the story. The 5 loaves and 2 fish are more than enough. Jesus takes them, blesses them, breaks them, and feeds everyone, not just 5,000 men, but also their wives and their children. The reality is it was probably closer to 10,000 people on that afternoon fed with 5 loaves and 2 fish. And do I believe this happened? Absolutely. Because the message in this gets to the heart of who our Creator and our God is. And God will take whatever it is, whatever we have to offer, and God can transcend all the limits of this world and this life. And God will bless it and use it. And when it's over with, there'll be an abundance left over. God will take whatever it is and use it for his purpose. That's what he did. And this miracle, as all miracles, foreshadow the greatest miracle of all, the miracle upon which our whole Christian faith is built and depends, that we are counting on the fact that one day, in spite of the evidence in front of us, the dead are going to live. We are going to be alive again. So if Jesus can overcome death, and we can have the resurrection of the body and the life everlasting, feeding 10,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fish, is child's play to Jesus. It's simple. And this message is a reminder to us. Jesus took what they had, just threw something together. Like mom throws together leftovers to feed the kids some days when there's nothing else left in the refrigerator. And he did it, and it worked. That's who we are. God throws us together and uses us for his purpose and his work. The big movie this weekend that came out that's getting a lot of buzz is the new Marvel superhero sci-fi flick, Guardians of the Galaxy. And the premise of the movie is these 5 strange type of heroes, not typical heroes. Actually, they are criminals when they're thrown together. 5 very different criminals are thrown together in prison, and each of them have had serious loss in their life that's made them bitter and angry and filled with pain. Yet they're thrown together under these strange circumstances, and they end up finding friendship in one another, and then ultimately saving the galaxy and becoming these heroes. We can't always pick our circumstances or the people we're with. But what God has done is throw us all together with all of our different backgrounds, from all our different ways and places and journeys in life, and brought us together in a fellowship and a friendship to make a difference in the world around us. To take who we are and what's given to us, whatever gifts we have, and God promises that when we offer them to him and trust in him, he will use it, especially at those times when we're challenged and we're struggling, to bring forth blessings of abundance. We had the pleasure of seeing this past week with this mission trip to Scranton. 18 of our high schoolers, plus 4 chaperones, went and joined over 300 other high schoolers in Scranton from 11 different states, 20 different churches, to help over 50 different families who were in the midst of struggle and hardship and pain. They met grandparents who were raising their grandchildren because parents weren't capable of doing it. Older people who were taking care of their younger children who were in hospice care because they were dying. They didn't have the time or the resources to take care of the little things around the house. So these high schoolers spent a week offering their time, working for nothing. And it added up to over 9,500 hours of labor and work for these 50-plus people and families to give them a little insight into the heart of God. It's not a lot in the big world when we look at hunger and starvation and struggle and pain and challenge, but for those people at that time in that place, it made all the difference in the world. And that's who we are as God's people. As God brings us together, he takes what we have, whether it's a lot or a little, 5 loaves and 2 fish, and he multiplies it for the well-being and the sake of the world, to remind us that in the midst of those most struggling and challenging times that we can face in our lives, God's grace and mercy is sufficient. As Isaiah the prophet said in our Old Testament, come you who are hungry and thirst, and you will have a feast that will last forever. So we take what we have, whatever it may be, we offer it to God. And when we do, He promises there will be more than enough. It will be abundant. There will be leftovers for us to share with others.